Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another What's for Dinner video. Today I have a bunch of sort of casserole inspired recipes. They're not all direct casseroles, but the idea was kind of to share a bunch of recipes in the same category. So I hope you guys enjoy this. Let me know what you think, and thank you so much for watching. First recipe is for a tuna casserole. This is a classic recipe, one of my personal favorites and a family favorite. So start by chopping one yellow onion, and once that's chopped, I will saute it really quick. You don't have to do this, but it keeps the onion from being too crunchy in the casserole, and my husband in particular doesn't like too much like raw onion, so the sauteing just kind of helps, and it does bring out the flavor a bit also. Alright, now it's time to add the casserole ingredients, the rest of the casserole ingredients in a bowl. I'm starting with about 15 ounces of canned tuna. That's about 3 small cans of tuna. I'm also adding some mayo and sour cream. I can't remember the exact measurements, so I will list them in the description box, the exact measurements of each ingredient, but I do both mayo and sour cream. It brings out a really good flavor, and then of course I add some mustard as well to that. And one ingredient that I actually forgot to add that is in my recipe is cream of mushroom soup. So add that as well as some Parmesan cheese. Then I'm just cooking up some macaroni noodles. I like macaroni noodles in tuna casserole. I'm not sure why, that's just what we like. Then to the casserole mixture, I am adding the sauteed onions as well as some canned peas. Then I am going to prepare the topping or the crust for the casserole. This is a little bit extravagant. You don't have to add butter to your breadcrumbs. You could just sprinkle breadcrumbs and Parmesan on top of the casserole, but I added about 1/2 cup of melted butter in with that, mixed it all up just to make it extra delicious. Then I am adding the noodles to the casserole mix and carefully mixing that around. Now I am spraying my casserole dish and adding the casserole mixture right on in there, and then I am going to top it with the breadcrumb mixture and just kind of spread it on over there, and it's as simple as that. Like I said, this is my all-time favorite tuna casserole recipe, a family favorite, and this also makes a really good freezer meal. I have a couple of these that I made for postpartum. Next, we have a chicken parmesan casserole. This was kind of an impromptu recipe that I came up with on the spot. I was craving chicken parmesan and I just came up with this recipe. So I started with some chicken that has been cooking in the crock pot. I'm adding a little bit of breadcrumbs, salt, and garlic powder to that and mixing it around, and then I'm just going to let that sit until I get the rest of the casserole ready. So taking some marinara sauce, I am going to first line the bottom of the pan with a little bit of marinara sauce, and then I am using cheese stuffed ravioli for the layers of this casserole. So I am just going to put on a single layer of ravioli, and then I am going to top that with more sauce and mozzarella cheese. And I had some extra ravioli, so I decided to do a second layer of ravioli and sauce. And then I just added the chicken that I had already prepared right on top. It's still steaming, so I just added that right on top. Added a little bit more sauce and some more mozzarella cheese. Now I'm going to prep the garlic bread for the side. I didn't actually put this in the oven until after the casserole came out and was sitting out, but I wanted to prep this for now. I just buy the dollar loaves of like French bread baguettes at Walmart, and I throw them right in the freezer and I pull them out, so this bread is frozen, but it's a really nice, easy way to have this type of bread for garlic toast. And that was my daughter yelling at everyone to not look at her, which I'm not sure the logic in that decision, but sorry about that.
Did I have some?
Yeah, it's hot though. You can have some. The next recipe I have is for beef stew with dumplings. This is another brand new recipe to us, but I was craving beef stew and I found a recipe on Pinterest with dumplings, so I thought I'd give it a try. So I start with about 3 tablespoons of flour and then I dump in my stew beef. Then I'm mixing that around and I'm going to saute the beef. The recipe didn't actually say to do this, but I feel like that's what you are supposed to do with beef stew, is saute the stew meat just a little bit to kind of seal in the flavors. I don't know, let me know, when you make beef stew, do you use flour and do you saute the meat a little bit before you put it in the stew? These funky looking things are purple carrots from my garden. And I am going to just peel them and chop off the little sprouting ends because they've been in my fridge for a long time, but they're still good. And I'm going to chop them up, and I did end up adding a few more than this as well. I just kind of eyeball it for how the ratio looks of carrots to everything else in there. And I don't think I've ever made a soup without at least one onion, right? Like, we just got to have that flavor. I actually used about 3 medium to small onions chopped up for this recipe. And I did pull out my veggie chopper for this one because that's just a lot of chopping. And now it's time for the celery. I rinsed off my celery and used about 4 stalks of celery, and I put that in my veggie chopper as well. Alright, and I didn't record this part, but I did add the beef to the bottom of this as well as all the veggies. And just to be clear, I didn't fully cook the meat because it will continue to cook along with the veggies in the stew, but I just kind of sauteed it on the outside to get some of that flavor. And now I am adding some beef broth. This recipe also called for some red cooking wine as well as a splash of red wine vinegar and Worcestershire sauce. Then I also added a jar of diced tomatoes, as well as a couple of bay leaves and some rosemary. Okay, now it's time to mix up the dumplings. So I combined 1 cup of flour, 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, a teaspoon of dried parsley, as well as a teaspoon of garlic powder and a teaspoon of onion powder, half a teaspoon of salt, and then 1/2 cup of plain Greek yogurt. So we mix that all together, and you don't add the dumplings until the last hour that the stew is cooking. I did have to get in there with my hands because the dough was really sticky. Alright, so when the stew has about an hour left to cook, I took the cover off, I removed the bay leaves, and I added my dumplings. My dumplings were not perfectly round, biscuit type things. I just kind of threw them in there because I was trying to film and do it all with only 2 hands, so it's not perfect, but it turned out totally fine. The dumplings were so good in this. My husband really, really loved them. And this is definitely a recipe that I will be making again. Okay, moving on, the next dinner we had was a sausage and gnocchi casserole. I've been on a kick with the gnocchi and the sausage combined together. It's really, really good, and I just have been loving it. So for this recipe, you need 1 package of potato gnocchi, 1 pound Italian sausage, half a cup of butter, half a cup of Parmesan cheese, and 6 ounces of heavy whipping cream, as well as some nutmeg. So I started by cooking the sausage on low until that is totally cooked, and I also started, if you can see over there in the upper right corner, I have a pot of water starting to boil to cook the gnocchi. So when the water is boiling, I added a little bit of salt, and then I added the gnocchi. That only cooks for like 3 or 4 minutes, really doesn't take very long to cook that. And then I did spread some butter on the bottom of this pan just so the casserole doesn't stick. And the first layer is just adding the gnocchi, and then you add the sausage on top of that, and you just kind of layer all the ingredients. My favorite way of doing it, because you don't have to use any bowls to mix anything up, and you know me, I like to use as few dishes as possible. Okay, now it's time to make the sauce to go over the casserole, starting with a whole stick of butter, which is 1/2 cup of butter, and just melting that in the same saucepan that we cooked the sausage in, because why not? Might as well use that flavor, right? Once that's all melted, I add 6 ounces of heavy cream, and you want to make sure that is fully combined and fully heated through. I did end up going in with a whisk just to make sure this got really well combined. And then I'm adding 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese. This is basically an Alfredo sauce, if you haven't figured that out already. So after that is all mixed up, I did add 1/8 teaspoon of nutmeg. I'm going to allow that to cook and thicken a little bit, stirring it, and after that's thickened, just pour it right on top of the casserole. This was a really nice, easy dish. I would recommend serving it with some vegetables. Maybe next time I'll try adding some vegetables, because that was the only thing that was missing. But look at that, isn't that just gorgeous? Okay, on to the last recipe. It is a smoked sausage and tortellini casserole. This was probably my favorite of all of them. It was really good. So I'm starting by chopping up some smoked sausage along with 1 onion, and I am going to saute those together in some olive oil. Okay, when those are starting to get cooked and heated through, I did add a jar of diced tomatoes, as well as a cup of chicken broth. I made sure that was heated through and combined, and then I added my tortellini and allowed that to cook in the mixture for as long as it takes to cook. Mine was not frozen. If yours is frozen, you're going to want to follow the directions on the package and just kind of let that all soak together. Okay, after that has had some time to cook, I gave it a quick stir and added some heavy cream. Then I stirred it again, allowed that to kind of heat through, and then I did add some cheddar cheese as the final thickening agent. And after I added the cheese and stirred it around, I did decide to put this in the oven for a little while to see if it would thicken up and become more casserole-like, which it kind of did. It didn't become super thick, but either way, this was so good. And that is it for this dinner video, guys. Let me know which was your favorite. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you, and I'll talk to you again very soon. Bye!